Hello and welcome to the first of our two-part summary on A Brick Lane by Monica Ali. This video is particularly useful if you are studying this text as part of your coursework or as part of your forthcoming exams. And in this first video, we will summarize the novel itself. It's quite a very detailed and very multi-layered, complex narrative. And equally, we'll look at the main key characters that you should be aware of when studying this text. Do bear in mind that we do have a part 2 to our video, which goes through themes, symbols, and key motifs. So do make sure you check out the second part of this two-part series. So, starting off with context. Now, Brick Lane was written by Monica Ali in 2003, and it was later turned into a movie, a fairly successful novel, and it was also quite a successful book. And this story follows a Bangladeshi migrant who migrates to London with her husband. Her migration is as a result of an arranged marriage. And this book portrays migrants and their journey to adapt in what is often a really challenging environment in a new city, which is at times very much glamorized outside of the country, so outside of the UK, an image of London is heavily glamorized. However, the stark realities are usually hidden. And so this book in many ways seeks to talk about this, but also about the influence of Bangladeshi culture and how it's still very much preserved, particularly by the Bangladeshi migrant community in Tower Hamlets in particular. Now, going through the plot of the novel itself. So we meet Nazneen, who is the book's protagonist, and she marries Chanu. So at the time she marries him, she is 18, and we get hints that he is much, much older than her. And in addition, this is an arranged and very traditional marriage that happens in her country, in Bangladesh. This is arranged by her father, who has lost his wife. And in many ways, Nazneen is treated as a commodity in this exchange. She has no say in this marriage. And however, she is very much a very obedient daughter, and she moves to London with her new husband, specifically to Brick Lane, to start the married life. Brick Lane is really important to bear in mind because it's in the borough of Tower Hamlets, which is very well known within London for having a huge Bangladeshi community, as well as a huge community of people from South and Southeast Asia. Now, Nazneen meets many Bangladeshi migrants in her new home in Brick Lane, so in Tower Hamlets. And while she values their culture, over the years as the novel progresses, she grows increasingly frustrated both with her husband, who does not allow her to study English or to travel alone within London due to his religious beliefs. They're Muslim. But equally, she becomes very frustrated at the constrictive expectations that women are expected to have within the Bangladeshi community. Nazneen gives birth to a son, Rakib, who she dearly loves. This is their first son, and this is in addition to bearing in mind the gender, the fact that he's a boy, kind of brings him a lot of significance in terms of his social or his future social standing within the Bangladeshi community. Chanu, her husband, is very worried that his son will be corrupted by Western influences like drugs and alcohol, particularly within the tower block that they live in Brick Lane. And Chanu decides that he wants to move the family back to Bangladesh. And this is one of the big kind of aspirations that Chanu has. However, we find that, and we later learn that Rakib sadly dies as a child. Nazneen, who had a sister in Bangladesh called Hasina, who ran away early on and who was rebellious, unlike Nazneen, she initially had disappeared. However, Nazneen and Hasina regain contact via letters. So Hasina in Bangladesh somehow finds where Nazneen has moved to, and she begins writing to Nazneen. And we learn that Hasina, Nazneen's younger sister, works in a factory, and she's later forced to become a prostitute in order to make ends meet. So initially, with respect to the story, Hasina, Nazneen's younger sister, had run away and engaged in a love marriage when she was 16 with a man. However, the man did not treat her well, and again she ran away, which was very contrary to Bangladeshi custom. And she then ended up working in a factory and then became a prostitute. So this is very significant. Nazneen later gives birth to two daughters, one called Shahana and the other called Bibi. And we learn that in spite of all of this and in spite of the changes that they undergo, Chanu remains determined to return to Bangladesh. He becomes a cab driver in order to pay for their journey home, and he finally allows Nazneen to start working and to start making garments for a factory in order to increase their income and to increase their savings. Nazneen gets work as a seamstress, and through this work she meets Kareem, and the two soon begin an affair. And Nazneen later on ends her affair with Kareem after a very traumatic experience. At the end of the novel, we find that Chanu ends up leaving alone for Bangladesh because Nazneen finally determines that the Bangladeshi culture and the life would be too restrictive for her two young daughters, and she doesn't want them to face the life that her sister Hasina faced as a woman who took initiative but was later punished by her culture for it. And so Nazneen decides to stay in London, and she begins her own sewing business and realises her dream of ice skating. Now, with respect to the key characters, the protagonist is Nazneen, and we learn that she has moved from a small town in Bangladesh to London with her husband Chanu, and although at first she's very obedient, over time she develops an independent spirit and she wants to work and travel alone. And in addition, she has an affair, which is very much contrary to what she would be expected. Chanu is Nazneen's husband, who's in his 40s, much older than Nazneen. He's very well educated and he works in London before becoming a taxi, and within London he worked in a council, and he continually feels very nostalgic and wishes to return back to Bangladesh. And initially in the story he has very traditional beliefs rooted in his belief and faith as a Muslim, and he does not allow Nazneen to travel alone or learn English. This is not to say that Islamic religion forbids women from travelling or learning English. However, Chanu has taken a very strict reading of this particular view on women, and it's for this reason he does not allow Nazneen to travel alone. Kareem is the other interesting character, and he is Nazneen's lover, and he's a second generation immigrant in London. He was born in London, even if he's Bangladeshi, and he begins to really have a massive identity crisis, and he later becomes very radicalized as an Islamic man. And he encourages Nazneen to be independent and helps her stand up for herself, and also he encourages her to develop herself intellectually. Finally, the other key character is Hasina, who's Nazneen's younger sister. She's interesting and she's a foil to Nazneen because she ran away to marry the man that she loves in Bangladesh instead of agreeing to an arranged marriage, which is very much contrary to expectations of women. However, over time, this is punished and this independence of her spirit is crushed, and she ends up working as a prostitute to make ends meet, and finally is rescued from a women's shelter, and she ends her days being a maid. So that's all. If you like this video, do give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more revision videos and resources to help you succeed in your studies. Do bear in mind that there is a part 2 where we'll be looking at themes, motifs and key symbols. So do check out part 2 of this series on Brick Lane.